Hey guys, welcome to Rosie's Dessert Spot. Today we'll be creating this 2-tier castle cake. To begin, I'm going to take my marshmallows, melt them in the microwave for about a minute, and then stir them until it is just a nice fluid consistency. You might want to put it back into the microwave for another 20 seconds if you still have little lumps. And then when it's completely fluid, you can add in your rice bubbles or rice puffs, whatever they call them in your country. Stir them through, add in any remainder, and then when it's all nicely combined, you can spray your bench top with some oil and then turn your mixture out onto your bench. I've applied a little bit of vegetable oil to my hands as well, just so I can handle it and it doesn't stick. Basically, I just want to really compress it all together, make it nice and firm, and remove any air between the rice bubbles. And when you're ready, just kind of press it, shape it, roll it on your countertop, add any extra oil to your hands as you need. When you have your desired shape, pop it to the side and continue making other towers. So I wanted mine to be a good 5 centimeters taller than my cake, and then 3 on top of the cake that were a bit shorter and thicker. You can use a cake tin to help you guide your eye as to how tall or how wide you need to make them. Once they've all been shaped, pop them onto a cookie sheet lined with baking paper and just set them in the fridge for a good hour or so until they're nice and firm. I have a 7-inch cake here that I have already crumb coated. I'm applying my final layer of frosting with ganache. Whenever I cover a cake with fondant, I always like to use ganache as the base. I find that it creates really even sides and sharper edges compared to buttercream. Once your sides have been nicely covered, take your frosting scraper and go around the cake. Make sure it's nice and smooth, pop it into the fridge to set for 20 minutes and repeat with your top tier. You can bring the lip of frosting to the middle with a spatula. If the lip of frosting is super duper thick and you want to cut it away instead, then you can use this method, which is a hot knife. Just a really sharp knife in a cup of boiling hot water, and then while it's nice and warm you can cut through that top lip. Basically I'm just keeping my knife level with the very top of the cake, and that kind of just guides it through the lip. And then right at the end you can just continue to cut away any excess, or just use a spatula to smooth that out. Now that a cake is nice and set from the fridge, we can pop some fondant over the top. It basically just stayed in the fridge for 20 minutes for that ganache to set up. I've rolled out my fondant to 3 or so millimeters in thickness, and I'm just undoing the pleats and massaging the fondant onto the side of the cake. You can then take a fondant smoother just to make sure that it's all adhered at the base. Cut away the excess. And then you can use 2 fondant smoothers to smooth out the sides and the top. You want to do the same for your bottom tier as well. You want to make sure that you press all of the air out from the very top of the cake. Sometimes you can get air trapped inside. If this does happen though, you can just take a really sharp pin, poke the hole and press out the air through the tiny hole that you create with the pin. I like to clap 2 of the fondant smoothers together right at the top to create a nice sharp edge. Granted, you don't need to worry too much about the edges here because they are going to be completely covered by our castle border. These are 3 dowels that I've inserted into the cake. They have been cut flush with the very top, and they're going to be supporting the weight of our top tier, so think of them as support beams. Now that our cakes have been stuck together with a little bit of ganache, it's time to assemble our castle towers. My crispy treats are now nice and firm from the fridge. I've rolled out some fondant nice and thick, so you can see there it's a good 5 mil or so in thickness. I'm cutting it to size and then rolling it up and just adhering that seam with a little bit of water. I wanted to keep the fondant really, really thick, and that way you can't really see the texture of the Rice Krispy treats. Otherwise it would be super duper bumpy if you rolled out your fondant too thin. Granted, the texture does play well with this particular cake because it looks like cobblestones on the side of your towers. For the top border, I've just used a border cutter with a straight kind of square and a semicircle right next to it. Kind of looks very castle-y. Attaching it to the top edges and the bottom edges with a little bit of water. And the way I like to apply it is I'll roll it up into a roll and then I'll unravel it directly onto the cake. Sometimes when you just pick it up as a straight ribbon piece, it can warp and rip as well if you're not too careful. So by rolling it up into a ring, just ensures that it doesn't warp and you can easily adhere it in one go. Push it up and down as you need to make sure it's all even. And then apply your little towers with a little bit of water. I actually found that I didn't need anything else. The fondant sticking to itself with water was more than enough to keep them attached, but if you want extra security, you can add some toothpicks into the base of your towers and then press that into the cake. For the top of my towers, I've literally just taken some wafer cones and cut them down with a serrated knife. I made them slightly bigger, that way they sit securely on the towers. Otherwise you can stick some buttercream inside them and let them stick to the cake with buttercream, or to your tower with buttercream. To hide the cones, I've taken lots and lots of fondant circles. You can just use the back of a piping tip to cut those out. And I'm just sticking them with a bit of water to the cones. For the door, I've just taken some burgundy red fondant and just cutting the general door looking shape. I cut it in half and then use the back of my knife to emboss some lines into the door to look like wood panels. Roll up a little ball of fondant and then press it into a longish kind of shape and stick it all to your cake with a little bit of water again. It still didn't look complete to me, so I grabbed some green fondant, rolled it into super duper thin logs to look like vines. I gave them a bit of a twist and pressed them onto the cake, again just using water as our adhesive here. And you can run these along the castle however you see fit. I made them pretty long, so I started them at the tower and ended them at the base. If you have blossom cutters, you could totally just use those to stick these blossoms onto the cake. I actually found these already made at our local grocery store. So they were nice and solid, nice and hard, and I was able to just press them onto the cake with water. And that's it. That is how you make a castle cake. This did take me just about all day to make, but the steps are super duper simple. It's just very repetitive, which is why it takes up a lot of time. But otherwise, she is ridiculously easy to make. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and give it a go. If you do, hashtag rosiesdessertspot so I can check it out. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one.